This animated carbon-based unit is happy to be here today. And I want to share with you some thoughts on agnosticism and rabbit holes. Along the way, I hope to further introduce myself to new friends here at Tapestry. I say new friends because I've been part of this community, as you heard earlier, since 1991. And I have known some of you since that time. So if you have joined Tapestry in the last decade, you're a new friend. Even my new friends may have observed that it's pretty easy to get me to jump down a rabbit hole. We're trying out some new technology too. If it isn't some new technology or a new way of mentoring leaders, it might be mention of a discovery in neuroscience that takes me off down a rabbit hole. Recently, one such intrigue happened as I worked with a business client. I remember clearly that my friend and I were sitting in a quiet restaurant. We were discussing his leadership style and management philosophy. He is determined to improve his ability as a leader, so our discussion was wide-ranging from personal values to organizational structure. What I don't recall is how we got onto the taboo subject of religion. Usually, I studiously avoid discussing religion, sex, or politics when I'm in a business situation, or, as my mother used to say, when in polite company. However, we somehow got to a point in our conversation where he stated, in a slightly uncomfortable and hushed voice, that he is a devout atheist struggling to be agnostic. My response, after a notable pause, was, "That may be the most intellectually honest statement I have heard about someone's religious beliefs or doubts." We went on to finish our discussion, but his admission that he was struggling to be agnostic stayed with me. And the next day, I ignored my long to-do list and scurried down a rabbit hole to learn more about agnosticism. My research, could you back up for me to the other side? Thank you. My research shows that the English biologist Thomas Henry Huxley coined the word agnostic in 1869. It simply means that a man shall not say he knows or believes that which he has no scientific grounds for professing to know or believe. Until now, I had mainly heard the word agnostic used in a religious context. As we see, however, the meaning is much more inclusive than the confines of religion. As I reflect on the meaning of the word, I came to realize it has also a great deal to do with building our beloved community here at Tapestry. Here's what I mean. I too am a devout atheist. In my mind, all the circumstantial evidence convinces me that there is no supernatural being intervening in the world. As I stated, the most intellectually honest position to take is that of agnostic. That is so because I cannot say, based on science, that there is no God. Someday, I may be able to point to conclusive science proving that there is no God, but I cannot at this point. However, when asked, I almost always say that I am an atheist, because that is what feels right for me. Here's a short version of how I came to my conclusion. As I said, I have a profound propensity for jumping down rabbit holes. Frankly, I'm much better than that. I will spend years exploring the whole rabbit warren and every hole in it. For example, I spent several years studying Christianity, not in seminary, but in a self-directed study. I read at least 24 books by various theological scholars. I attended several 4-day working sessions of the Jesus Seminar up in Santa Rosa, California. And there I learned that the religion of the theologians is vastly different from the doctrine of the people in the pews. The theologians are far more equivocal about what is and is not so. I spent about 10 years of reading and studying Taoism, not full time, of course, but religion was the focus of my free time studying for years. The bottom line of that effort was my realization that my religion is atheism and my philosophy of life is Taoism. I do view atheism as a religion of sorts. It has its own set of beliefs, and it takes as an article of faith that there is no God. I have always felt comfortable in a Unitarian Universalist congregation from a spiritual point of view. I have felt supported, included, and recognized even as I shared my atheist beliefs. Having spent some time in the rabbit hole of agnosticism, I have some additional insight into my worldview, and it is summed up with this quotation from Bertrand Russell. The whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves and wise people so full of doubt. Remember those equivocal theologians? Russell's observation fits well with those theologians and with Taoist philosophy. And as I've grown older and experienced more of life, I find I'm sensitive to the complexity in our world, along with the attendant doubt that complexity brings. As our reading this morning suggests, I have learned to cherish my doubts even as I do not always express those doubts. When I find myself being all too sure about my view of things, I recall Mr. Russell's wise observations, and I try to fight my way back to agnosticism as best I can. I also remind myself of our fourth principle, which states that we affirm and promote the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And I believe Tapestry does an excellent job of being inclusive of many religious beliefs. If I were grading, I'd give us an A, maybe even an A+. But let's move to another part of my agnostic rabbit hole. And I'm too young to talk to you about sex, so let's move right to politics. So let me share some insight gained over yet another lunch. This time, the person I met is not a client. She is a friend and a colleague, and I have known this lady for a long time. She is brilliant and insightful, and I value her opinion on many things. Years ago, we met in a professional network of consultants, mentors, and coaches. Maybe you know her. She's rather tall. She has kind of an Asian look about her. She sings tenor. She sings tenor in the Tapestry choir. And yes, that would be our own Celia Young. Here's my version of that lunch conversation. After the usual catching up on our personal and professional lives, the conversation turned to our shared experience here at Tapestry. I don't remember exactly how she phrased the question, but it went something like this. How comfortable are you at Tapestry since you are a conservative in this liberal congregation? Wow. I do not view myself as a conservative. My friends who self-identify as conservatives view me as a flaming liberal. Here's how I see it. I cannot say I have found a comfortable political home. Not anywhere, not even here at Tapestry. And here's some background information to help you understand what I'm saying. I grew up in the northeastern United States, and from the time I was able to vote until my late 20s, I affiliated with the Republican Party, mostly because that is where my parents registered. My father was an entrepreneur who owned an HVAC and construction and repair business. To this day, my experience is that most business owners identify with the small government crowd. They want as little business interference as possible. But sometime in the late 70s to mid 80s, things began to change for me. I found I could no longer relate to the Republican Party. In my experience, their knee-jerk support of anything to do with the business community was wrong. At that time, I was working in or with big public aerospace and defense businesses. I understood from the inside that many companies didn't deserve support for all of their initiatives. Business leaders are charged in their articles of incorporation with maximizing shareholder value, and that singular focus often results in a need for regulation, not unconditional support. While I couldn't fully agree with the Democratic Party, they were the only other choice if I wanted to participate in the political process. Since I did want to exercise my political rights, I affiliated with the Democratic Party for a while. Sadly, the same thing happened. After several years, I could no longer support the knee-jerk anti-business and pro-union stance of many in the Democratic Party. It is my experience that businesses do not deserve universal condemnation and unions do not deserve unconditional support. Both are businesses and both have strong points, along with areas for improvement. While I am and was comfortable with many progressive social initiatives, I continued to struggle with what I considered to be the irresponsible position of many liberal Democratic politicians. If it was business, it was automatically bad, or at best it was suspect. And I found that liberal solutions were often surface solutions, treating symptoms rather than systematic solutions. I believe in finding the root cause of a problem and correcting it. So luckily, in 1991, we moved here to Orange County. And that move gave me a chance to make a clean break from both parties. I registered as the California equivalent of agnostic, or independent. That is where I am most comfortable, since both parties appear to be digging in at the extremes. I believe our good friend Celia got things about right. If my liberal friends think of me as being conservative, and they do, and my conservative friends think of me being progressive, and they do, then I must be somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Here's the question, though. Are we agnostic as to the political views of our Tapestry friends? Are we willing to explore their thought process on why they may have a more conservative or liberal outlook than you or I might have? Do we take an interest in understanding their intent? Are they really welcome here? We spoke these words this morning. Cherish your doubts, for doubt is the attendant of truth. Doubt is the key to the door of knowledge. It is the servant of discovery. That sounds like agnosticism to me. Moreover, I believe the doubt to be cherished is at least in part self-doubt. That doubt calls into question whether my view is the right one. It demands that I not consider my opinion to be the truth. I am required to remember that my interpretation of a situation is just one of many possible valid pictures of reality. The title for today's sermon is Struggling to be Agnostic. For me, the emphasis is struggling, and I continue to struggle. Human beings are meaning-making machines, and I'm no exception. I was raised and educated to be a problem solver. That often means evaluating a situation and then being confident that I understand the complexity well enough to decide on and implement a solution. Being agnostic does not mean failing to draw a conclusion or taking action at some point, but it does mean that I must keep in mind that I might not be correct and that things will change. I remind myself that there is very little nonfiction in our world. It's almost all fiction. I say that because we all have filters that determine how we interpret what we observe in the world. We see what we believe, not the other way around. When it comes to the political life of our congregation, I am less likely to give us a high grade. My feeling is that we often assume that anyone who is a member of this congregation must be politically liberal. Guess what? That's the same assumption that I make as well. I am circumspect about sharing my views on the economy or business or the efficacy of a particular social action while at Tapestry. Why? Because, lacking any evidence to the contrary, the odds are that you are politically liberal, not just religiously so. But what about those of us who aren't? By acting on the assumptions we make, are we marginalizing conservatives or moderates in our congregation? Are we inadvertently turning visitors away from a spiritual home because of those assumptions? I believe that I strive to be agnostic. If I do, I will be honoring you and your beliefs. I will ascribe good intentions on your part until you prove I shouldn't make that assumption. We can disagree on a solution, but if I assume your intention is right, then the devil is in the detail, not in you or me. I am offering for your consideration that we all will be better UUs if we remain as agnostic as possible for as long as possible. One last comment. I have had more than 40 years to grow a thick political skin, so please don't feel like you must give me a hug. I'll gladly take your hug, but please, not out of political pity. Because beneath all our differences and behind all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. Namaste, blessed be, amen, and may the force be with you.